Ukraine war. Go.
The Ukraine war. That's last week was so fucked up.
Wasn't that incredible?
There was two things. I couldn't decide whether I wanted to pay attention to the news about the Queen, the coverage about her, or the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
Because it was like the original invasion in reverse.
Yeah.
You know, it started out small. It was just like, oh yeah, and it was the counteroffensive in Kherson they were talking about, that they've been talking about for ages and ages and ages.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden this other thing going on. Right?
Do you think maybe Kherson was just a giant feint?
I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah.
Right. I wondered about that at the time.
Yeah.
I was like,
I thought about that at the time too, but I never thought for a minute that the actual counterattack would take place in Kherson. I thought it would take place in Zaporizhia. But I thought, because they telegraphed the Kherson offensive.
Yeah.
Completely.
But they not only telegraphed, but they actually did the operational moves. So they had the troops in place, and they were doing the artillery. Yeah. Like, everything was supporting the concept that they were actually going to do it.
So telegraphing their punch. And so the Russians poured guys over the Dnieper.
So next thing you know...
And then the Ukrainians slammed the door shut behind them.
There's this other thing going on, right? And people are saying... And again, the West media is like, oh, let's downplaying it. Well, don't expect too much.
Yeah.
They've got a few hundred miles.
Temper the expectations.
Let's not get... And just every day, it just got exponentially, holy fuck.
I was in the bush. I was in the bush. And every now and then, I would hit a high point, a high feature. And then my phone would get signal. And so then, all these texts come in. And so my friend is updating me. And so, like every, 10, 12 hours, whatever, I get a bunch of, she's giving me some updates, right? I'm like, that they are on the outskirts of, Kupiansk.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy. And then the next one.
And then Izium.
Izium has fallen. You mean Izium, which had 20,000 Russians in it a week ago? Holy cats. And I just read ISW's assessment.
And the best part is that they left their equipment, right? It was you can't drive a vehicle out of here because they'll get hit with the drone. So it's assholes and elbows for the rest of the border. Right?
It was like Dunkirk.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we've got a bunch of tanks to use.
And they literally...
So 6,000 armored vehicles? And then
the Russians literally transferred more weapons to the Ukrainians than all of NATO did.
And this morning I was reading ISW's assessment of it, and how they're still continuing to attack around Bakhmut and Avdiivka, and said that it was some of the most forceful language that they've used the entire thing, and that Russia continues to commit resources to meaningless offensive action in territories that have nothing more than emotional significance to certain leaders in the Donetsk People's Republic, instead of reinforcing obvious weak points in Lugansk Oblast. And that this severely calls into question, Russian decision-making in this war. Mm-hmm. And I thought, holy, this is incredible. What we're saying, the Ukrainians have crossed the Oskil River, that it's looking more and more probable that they're going to surround and cut off Liman and trap another pocket of Russian troops, and from there they're going to cut off Severodonetsk from the north again, and then all the while the Russians are still trapped north of, this huge amount of combat power is trapped north of the Dnieper, where the Ukrainians aren't looking to make massive geographical gains. It's fix and attrit.
Yeah, it's
just hold them in place, and it's like the Russians aren't allowed to withdraw. They can't go south of the river. They got no way of getting there. And the Ukrainians just continually engage them, are making them consume fuel, making them consume ammunition that they cannot replace.
Well,
this is...
Yeah, like I said, it was
really
like the start of the war in reverse.
How far do you think the Ukrainians are going to push? Do you think they're trying to get the Crimea back?
I think they will, yes.
Do you think it's in their best interest to take it back?
Not yet.
But do you think it is
in the long
term?
In the long term, yes. They do need to control the Kerch Strait. Maybe not Sevastopol.
Yeah.
But they must control the Kerch Strait because a huge percentage of their industrial exports.
Yeah, it all goes through the Black Sea. Yeah.
Of the Sea of Azov.
Right.
And the Kerch Strait, when it was under Russian control, made a massive choke point. And of course, after 2014, the Russians were routinely interfering with Ukrainian exports.
Right.
So I do think that they do need to control at least half of the Kerch Strait. You could maybe, as like a sop to the Russians, say, you know what? We'll let you have an area around, let's say, the southern and western edge of the Crimea, centered around Sevastopol, as an exclave in the same way that you have Kaliningrad. And in many ways, that would be like something that the Russians would want, but not want. Like, it would have emotional significance for them.
Yeah.
But it would be a logistical nightmare, a massive weak point, in the same way that West Berlin
was a weak point.
Was actually a weak point for the NATO allies during the Cold War.
Yeah.
So I could see them doing that, but I do think they have to control at least their half of the Kerch Strait.
Right.
Like they can't allow that to remain in Russian hands.
I find it impossible to second guess what they can or cannot do anymore. Part of me wonders if they won't have Kherson rolled up in the next 5 days, and then they could actually be at the Kerch Strait in a week and a half. I'm not saying it's just like what's occurred this week.
Yeah, like how long can the Russians go? How long can the Russians hold out on the north bank of the Dnieper? That's a real good question.
They left behind.
Yeah.
That's logistically they've been fucked the whole time, and then this happened, right?
Yeah.
They're already suffering for troops. You got to figure that they're going to run out of steam at some point. They have to.
Well,
it doesn't matter about the will of Putin.
I would say they've run out of steam now. I mean, the Russians have not really. I'd say they ran out of steam after they took Lysychansk.
Well, right now, the assessment I'm hearing is they have no offensive in them anymore. They can make
very, very small
incremental
gains.
They can defend.
Well,
they really haven't made any gains since they took Lysychansk.
Like their morale, like Ben's always described morale as the willingness to fight, not how happy you're Jews. So their morale as their willingness to fight has got to be in the freaking toilet.
Well, they all ran.
Because everybody ran. Exactly, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody ran. They're recruiting out of prisons. There was a video on one of my Facebook pages the other day of the CEO Wagner Group.
Yeah. Addressing your group of cons.
Recruiting at penal colony number 8 or something like that, right?
6. Yeah.
It's just like...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're really... Things are not good for the Russians, man.
No.
They're not good.
So it's a question of, how bad does it get for them, and how does Putin respond? Or do they take him out? I mean, this is the...
Good questions, man.
The buddy who used to be in U.S. military intelligence conversation I keep having with him. We had them at this one at the beginning, we're trying to have it again now. Mm-hmm. Does he go tack nukes? And if he does, is that when someone finally steps up and arrests him or puts a bullet in his head? Okay.
Do you think he would?
I don't know.
I don't know. Is flip a coin with him?
I don't think he would.
If you were to give the order, I think someone steps up and says, no, we're not doing this.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Because
like
if you're anyone with even a schmick anywhere in the Russian military hierarchy and you're like, I can't get the troops to fight in a conventional battlefield and you want me to push them through a now nuclear battlefield, it ain't gonna fucking happen.
To be honest, right? I think Putin can survive defeat in Ukraine.
Yeah, he probably can.
I think he can. I don't think it's a given that his life is on the line with this.
I don't know.
I would agree with you. I think he can survive that.
He can push this off as saying, I was given really bad advice by my advisors.
Yeah, he can.
And I'll throw Sergei Shoigu under the bus.
These 22 body bags.
Yeah, Shenko goes under the bus.
Yeah, all those people, they go.
Yep.
off to penal colony number 8 they go or whatever, right? Like,
I don't know.
because I hold my people to account or whatever.
That's right. Yeah, I can see, that in the same way that Stalin was never held accountable for the reversals of the first, 3 years of the Great Patriotic War. I don't think it's a given.
Are you trying to steal my cord?
Nope. Just call out and give back to you.
I think he's been too vocal.
I don't-
get away with it.
I don't think it's a given that his life is on the line here.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'd say it's again everything about this, whether the Ukrainians do better or not, whether Putin uses techniques or not, whether Putin survives or not, they're all flips of the coin.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's random, or I don't think it's that close. I think the Ukrainians have much better leadership.
Oh, that's clear.
I think the Ukrainians have much better forces.
I think eventually Ukraine's going to do better than it has now. I'm just saying it doesn't do any better than in this push.
The other thing
in
is
this
that
particular push. Well, again, I think this particular push, or are you talking Kherson? Or
Steve.
or are you
You
talking
asked
about
the right question.
Kharkiv?
Do they go for the Crimea, and should they go for the Crimea? And that is the big question mark.
Right, yeah, I
Right,
think
because
they will.
if they get that, then Russia's like Putin's humiliated.
I think Putin could survive the humiliation.
Yeah, he'd survive the humiliation. Russia's humiliated, but I think Putin can survive it. I don't think they would immediately. I think that if you can cut off Crimea from southern Kherson, if you can get to that, if you can cut off the Crimean Peninsula so that the only connection to it is over the Kerch Bridge, and you want to keep that bridge intact, like you want to make the Russians think you're going after it, but don't actually go after it. And then from there, I think
Just wire a couple spans and then no long.
yeah, just lob a couple things at it.
Yeah.
Because the Russians are going to, because it's a symbolic importance to them, they're going to pull all kinds of resources to protect it, which then exposes them elsewhere on the battlefield. I thought for sure the big thrust would come down from Zaporizhia through Tokmak, through Melitopol. Because just south of Melitopol is a river delta that is not passable by vehicles or rail. It's a narrowest point in that whole southern point of Ukraine, and that if you cut that off, then all of Kherson and Crimea must now be resupplied over the Kerch Bridge. Like that's like we're now trying to fill an Olympic swimming pool with a garden hose.
Or by ship.
Or by ship, but the Ukrainians have denied all of that. I mean, unless they go over the Sea of Azov. But if you have coastal access to it, your anti-ship missiles now deny the surface fleet.
Yeah.
Right? And so they can't even do
But
that.
then it becomes a question of how much ammo do they have?
For the Russians or the Ukrainians?
The Ukrainians.
They got enough Harpoon and their own domestic, or what are they, Trident? I think that's the name of it. Their domestic anti-ship missile, the ones that sunk Moscow.
Oh, yeah. I think it was
Neptune missiles.
sorry.
They've got enough Harpoon and Neptune for what the Russians have in transport.
Yeah.
So that's what I thought was going to happen. But of course, like every other thing in this war, I've been fucking wrong.
So the U.S. finally issued a contract to resupply their store of javelins.
Oh yeah, I can see.
$340 million.
Yeah, I can see that.
88. They said over 8,800 javelins.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Yeah.
Well, money well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Something that I would like to see maybe addressed sometime going forward is the consistent failure in Western counterinsurgency policy. How many counterinsurgencies has the West defeated since World War II?
Okay. I think the SAS has actually achieved a couple. Malaysia.
Malaya?
Sorry,
is
yeah, Malaya
the
at the
classic.
time. Yeah.
Malaya is the classic successful counterinsurgency.
And Oman.
say Oman. You could also say Kenya in the suppression of the Mau Mau rebellion.
If okay, so I've never heard.
Maybe.
I've
And
never heard the SAS involved. By
It wasn't so
name.
much the SAS, but it was the British Army.
British forces. Okay.
Yeah. Would you put Northern Ireland in there as a successful suppression of a counterinsurgency?
No,
Or
no.
would you say it's more of a draw?
The solution was political, right?
But the solution to counterinsurgency will always be political.
Yes, ultimately.
Even more.
Okay, but then the question is behind the scenes. Right?
I'm saying it's debatable.
You're talking military.
Northern Ireland is debatable. You could make an argument it was successful.
No.
You could make an argument it was unsuccessful.
No,
Northern Ireland is still part of the UK.
Sure.
There hasn't been a bombing since
Yeah.
how long?
Algeria. Who won that one?
The Algerians. The
The
French
Algerians.
left.
Vietnam. Against both the French and the Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Vietnamese lost it against the British.
Well, they didn't really try. I mean, Britain said, okay, we're the fuck out of here. How about the Dutch in Indonesia?
No, the Indos won that one.
Yeah, the Dutch didn't win that one.
No. Dutch
How,
didn't win anything, but-
they sure didn't. Can you name me any other... Iraq?
No.
But like even
Afghanistan?
Well, they're still fighting. It's just a different insurgency now. It's
I
got
mean,
a different.
clearly
name.
the West didn't win, though.
where were the Portuguese?
Yeah.
Portuguese were in the Congo, right?
Yeah, or the Belgians were in the Congo.
Belgians were in the Congo. Portuguese were in
Mozambique.
Angola
And
and
Mozambique.
Mozambique.
Yep, neither one did they win.
No,
In fact, there was not a single European nation that won in Africa.
at all. Yeah.
Yeah, at all. So,
Did the Cubans win? They were on kind of the winning side, maybe.
sort of, I mean...
No, they're
The West-
in that one. The
Every
insurgents definitely won.
Western nation not named the UK
Has lost.
has never won a counterinsurgency.
Yeah.
So clearly this is a gap, and I'm going to say that I would give you the argument that the only reason the British won was because of the colonial infrastructure they had in place. In that the British were able to achieve complete and total cooperation between the military, the civil authority, and the police and the judiciary,
Yeah.
because all of them were under their auspices of the colonial office.
Yeah, but what also goes with that is the colonial mindset, right? So
sure.
that
We own it.
again
It's
attitudes that would not fly these days, right?
I mean,
There would have been racism involved. There would have been a lack of civil liberties.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
The West was
Well, you
not
remember the most recent
prepared
news was
to
what,
go to those
19
lengths.
When was Oman? 19... It was
63.
Yeah.
63.
no, I
That
think
one in the
Oman
70s, didn't
Oman was the 70s.
Yeah.
Oh,
It was-
sorry, I'm thinking of Aden.
Yeah,
I'm
Aiden
thinking
was
of Mad
60s.
Mitch in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Mad Mitch in Aden, yeah.
Because
I mean, the United States could never, ever achieve.
no, because the United States is always a visiting power. It's never.
That's right.
It's never.
It always wanted to work through
Yeah.
the host government, be it Numdim, Hamid Karzai,
Yeah.
whatever flunky they had in Iraq, and an Iraqi army, an Afghan national army, the Afghan national police, where they were always dealing with this proxy that was inherently and chronically unreliable. Whereas the British didn't have that problem.
Yeah, and because any locals that were in the British security forces were usually in like the lower portion, whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, they'd be
where it
regulars
was
in
the
the
British who
military units.
commanded every station, every
Yeah.
police division. They controlled the courts. It was
I've got an
British judges.
emergency building.
Well-
I hope you guys don't need the toilet for a while. Is there a second one in that?
Yeah, there is.
So you guys can
He's
use
gonna
that.
blow it up. We'll go in the back here.
Or do you want me to go use the other one?
No, that was fine.
Okay.
The other one isn't finished, but the
You
toilet
know, I
works.
mean, so that colonial infrastructure
Yeah.
gave the British certain advantages.
I always thought that they probably had to politically, but like the Americans established the coalition political authority in
Mhm.
Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
and then they handed it over way
Quickly dismantled it.
too
yeah.
dismantled. Yeah, like it was like, okay, you need to probably sit on this thing. Like Bremer probably
Mhm.
needed. I mean, Bremer I don't think was a great choice. He made a lot of bad decisions.
Kind of like what we did in Germany.
yeah, but
Like
Bremer
we never
probably needed,
handed over German political authority till 51.
Yeah, Yeah, well, the same thing. Bremer probably needed to be in charge of Iraq for a good 5 years.
Yeah.
As Emperor of Iraq.
Yeah.
Until.
Yeah.
Right? Because you need to establish.
Mm-hmm.
Like all kinds of things that were a civil society, right? The rule of law. That shit was never established, and it was never going to be established under the Iraqis. No. As long as they were fighting tribe by tribe and trying to punish their enemies.
Yep.
It was never going to happen.
As long as they were allowed to continue in their old culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing, my big concern with our style of counterinsurgency, like, number one, the Americans could never, ever, ever, just because of their national culture, do anything that could be perceived as imperialist.
Mm-hmm.
They can't. I mean, just because of their national myth, right? The other thing is this, and I'm really going to point the blame at the Americans here, this idea of establishing FOBs, hard permanent bases that are under observation by the enemy 24/7.
I always
the
thought
Taliban and the Fedayeen in Iraq always knew where all Allied forces were at all times.
Yeah.
We never knew where they were.
No. No, you never did. And the other thing was, my opinion on the whole thing was that, or at least like for as far as FOBs and that went, you should have like narrowed it down to platoons. You would have lost some platoons, but the platoons should have gone, and they should have gone to a village, and they should have set up in the village. We're here, and immediately made everyone's life better. Brought in electricity, you brought in plumbing.
Because the platoon provides security.
And the platoon provides security for the village.
Yeah.
Right? And that's it. And they live there.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think they did that in certain places, and I think the Brits tried that in Basra.
Yeah.
Something.
Well, no, even the Brits even had fucking cops and FOBs in Basra.
They did, yes.
But they probably did go down.
But they did go down to platoon level.
But Basra, I mean, the Shiites went crazy once.
Mm-hmm.
And the Brits had a hell of a fight on their hand. That was what?
Something like that, yeah.
05?
Yeah.
And then Sistani just fucking said, everybody quiet down, and then they quiet down. And so after that, the Brits had a generally fairly easy time in Basra.
But an example of, it wasn't a victory, but it was a severely outnumbered and outgunned security force, which fought the guerrillas to an absolute standstill, which was Rhodesia. Zanu and Zipra never
but here's the thing about
really knew where the Rhodesian strike forces were.
Yeah.
Because they had Fire Force.
Yeah.
And they had their very advanced recce presence.
Yeah.
So
between SAS and SEAL Scouts and
yeah. Or even just like trackers.
Yeah.
What do they call them? They name after a bird. Like sparrows.
Right.
Of like just reservists in the Rhodesian regiment.
Yeah.
Who were continually tracking, just following spoor, running down these tracks till they found where they went.
Yeah.
And the Zimbabweans, I guess you could call them, never ever knew where these elements were. They never knew when all of a sudden some fucking Alouette comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Or, Dakota comes over and then a bunch of shoots come out. Well, fuck me. They never ever were able to permanently take hold of a region until the resources of the Rhodesian government just dwindled and dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. But on the other hand, I think that is a good, intentional practice if you're fighting a counterinsurgency. Like, let's say Western Canada is a country, and we got an insurgency everywhere. We take the piece of ground that we figure we can afford to lose. Let's just say Manitoba. Okay, we're going to pull out of Manitoba. We're pulling out all of our civil infrastructure. We're closing all the hospitals. We're going to close. We're shutting off the power, shutting off the water. We're making no attempt whatsoever to show a presence in this place. We're making no attempt. Like, we're ceding it to the enemy.
Yeah.
So not only do we pull our police and our military, we pull the fucking the social service, the post office, like everything.
Yeah.
And then we're going to say to the enemy, okay, Taliban, You fucking run it. What we do leave is an intelligence presence that is recording, photographing, monitoring. So every time the Taliban steps on its dick and murders a bunch of schoolgirls, or comes down.
There's a little Febreze over on that front by the entrance there. If you.
Every time they reveal their true selves, we're recording it and broadcasting that to the population of Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. Say, okay, maybe you don't like the way we run things. That's how they run it.
Yeah.
Choose accordingly. And I don't think any counterinsurgency effort has really done that.
Well, the other thing is Rhodesians lived there.
They did.
Right? That was
they,
home.
They were not willing, they did have to concede large parts of the north and the west.
Yeah.
But that was because of a lack of resources.
Yeah.
And they never did pull their post office out. No. They never did pull the school teachers out. They never did pull the clinics out.
Where was this?
Rhodesia. I was just saying that something that I would like to explore if I was running a counterinsurgency is let's say, just for the sake of a geographical model, Western Canada is our country. We're fighting the Taliban. We take a piece of ground that we say, okay, you know what could we afford to lose? And just for the sake of picking one, I'll say Manitoba. We consolidate, say number one, we're not winning. The Taliban's getting stronger and stronger and stronger every day. So I can't keep everything.
Yeah.
So I got to lose something. I'm going to consolidate my forces in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC. But I don't just pull my police and military out of Manitoba. I pull the hospitals, I pull the teachers, I pull the post office, I pull the transportation department. I'm not repairing roads. I'm not doing fuck all. I turn off the power, I turn off the water. Okay, Taliban, you run it. You're so fucking great. It's now Manitoba stand.
Do you blow the power stations in place?
No.
You just turn them off.
I maybe remove key parts.
Right.
I'll dismantle and remove the transformers, the big fancy ones from Germany that they can't possibly replace.
Right.
I'll do shit like that.
Yeah.
And I move all that shit out. But what I do leave behind is an intelligence apparatus so that we can monitor, photograph, and record. So when the Taliban shows what it's really about and it abuses its power, we're recording it. And we're broadcasting that to the population in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. So we can say, okay, maybe you don't like the way we do things. Maybe we got a lot of shortcomings. Okay, fair. That's your option. Look how they're
in Afghanistan. They've always known that. The people have always known that.
I don't think they have. I mean, not to the extent that. I mean, you don't appreciate something until it's gone, and we have seen this in many counterinsurgencies that failed. In that, as soon as the Algerians took over, there was a massive wave of refugees within the next 5 years. Same thing with the Vietnamese boat people who wanted to flee the new regime. Holy fuck, this is really shitty. We didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was. The people of Zimbabwe, I don't think they had any idea what they were getting into.
Oh yeah, Mugabe fucked that place up.
He did, but how? Sunday, right? But the average people looked at the shortcomings of Rhodesian society and said, "This is unacceptable."
Well, I mean,
without knowing that what they were getting with Mugabe was worse. Yeah. Well, present that to them. In other words, when you're fighting a counterinsurgency, your reality is being compared with the insurgents' theory. Make them face reality too. Make them, you can get the political win by exposing their political shortcomings.
Depends on your starting point. So here's a couple of things that popped in my head in the last minute and a half. One is, it depends what your starting point was, right? So these people are fucked either way.
Say the civilian population.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, what are their choices? Well, you look at the military regime that the U.S. was fighting with against the communists. They were corrupt as fuck.
Or let's say Nicaraguan or Cuban scenario.
Yeah. So I was actually going to end up with Cuba.
Yeah.
Right. Because Cuba, I find, actually becomes the linchpin of any such conversation.
Yeah.
Because,
Who was the guy? Who was Somoza? Somoza was Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Batista?
Batista, yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Yes.
again, it's like, okay, you can have this shitty ass thing
Yeah.
that you've got, or you can have this other thing that is at least rooted in some
A theory that gives you hope.
well, and some measure of respect, and some
Yeah.
it's the lack of equality.
Castro
right? So now we've
offered
taken
a better future.
yeah
Whereas Somoza, you were never going to, or Bautista, you were never going to get that.
no, right, and that's the case over and over again. Now the funny thing is, I think the reason you use Cuba is it became the status quo. It became exactly what you're talking about, and that's where you can start parsing the question you just asked, right?
Well, I think hand in glove with that is the realization within the Rhodesian regime that status quo will not work. That we have to change our society. We have to become a racially egalitarian society. Mm-hmm. There were hardliners within it, but what was his name? Ian
Smith.
Ian Smith. Within Ian Smith's cabinet, there was an understanding that, yeah, we're not going back to 1956. We've got to change. And with a regime like Batista, where you have, first of all, a lot of our misadventures, we as in the West, misadventures in counterinsurgency were based on domino theory.
And I was going to say the exact
which
same
turned
thing.
out to be,
Completely flawed.
yeah, not a concern.
Yeah.
The West vastly overestimated the appeal of socialist revolution. Mm-hmm. And, like, for example...
And the U.S. specifically made the same fuck up
Yeah.
with both Castro and Hope.
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
both approached the Americans first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And, like, again, what harm came to American foreign policy by allowing Vietnam to go communist? In the long term.
Well, yeah, nothing.
No.
Right?
Yeah, but look how
Yeah.
it fucked them
'Cause-
domestically, right?
Because
horribly!
Because 4 years after,
Yeah,
North
Vietnam
Vietnamese
was-
won,
yeah.
they were
at war with China.
China.
Yeah. And, like, I know that the
Of all places.
big fear was that the Soviets would now have access to 2 deep water, warm weather ports in Cam Ranh Bay and Hanoi.
Yeah.
But
So
they
what?
weren't so what? They weren't able to use either one of them. And they, I mean, number one, the Soviet Pacific Fleet was never going to challenge for any kind of...
Yeah, no.
Like, it's kind of like saying, well, it's one thing to say, look, man, the Russians got a massive fucking fleet in the Pacific. If we can keep them bottled up in Vladivostok, we're okay. Mm-hmm. But it's like, well, the Russians don't have a Pacific fleet worth talking about.
I mean, the only thing you'd worry about is subs.
If that.
Well, with nukes.
You know?
Right, because now they're
Yeah,
accessibility in the Pacific.
Yeah, but in terms of the stage leading up to that, of a conventional war, like, no, like, it's one thing to say we need to deny ports to the enemy's navy. Worry about that when they have a navy. But when they don't have a navy, why are you worried about their access to ports? It's kind of like saying we're really worried about denying lunar landing pads to the Mexicans. The Mexicans don't have a space program.
Yeah.
Why are we going to go to war to deny lunar access to the Mexicans when they don't have a space program?
But now you're talking political strategy.
What did
Right,
von
but
Clausewitz say war was? An
Right.
extension of politics by other means.
But the problem is, as you pointed out, domino theory, as you pointed out,
it's fake.
it's
And we're-
flawed, right?
Yeah.
Because
It just wasn't true.
Well, so it's that mindset that starts with, well, you know, everything socialist is communist and all communism is bad, so anything that remotely looks like it, we're going to crush it, right? And that's
they
why they went into
overestimated the appeal of it. Like, they thought if Vietnam becomes communist, we're going to lose Laos, we're going to lose Cambodia, we're going to lose Thailand, we're going to lose Burma, we're going to lose India.
I'm going to flip that statement on its head. You're right, but I think they've always had an over rabid abhorrence for anything that is
Yes. Well, this was
that is left of their right. You know,
I believe the
Soviet
Truman
right.
Doctrine. We must contain socialism.
Mm-hmm.
This was pretty sure the Truman Doctrine emerged after the Korean War. That the size of the communist world must be left. It must not be allowed to expand. Therefore, any attempt to broaden communism, like Vietnam, which was the first test of the Truman Doctrine, was vigorously challenged. And I think it took American defeat in Vietnam to abandon the Truman Doctrine.
Probably.
Say that, look, like...
Because initially it looked like it was working, right? Because the first test of it was probably Iran.
Iran?
Iran. Because Iran had a democratic socialist government, and it was 58.
That's right. Overthrown in the Shah.
And then they reinstalled this, and it was the CIA in association with the Brits. And the reason... probably blame the Dulles brothers for this. For a lot of the legacy of this, right? Because one was Secretary of State and the other was the head of CIA.
Yeah.
Right? And then the Brits were mad because the new socialist government was going to nationalize the Iranian oil fields, all of which was controlled by BP.
Yeah.
Right? And owned by BP, and the profits went to BP, not the Iranians.
Yeah.
And they had
They had a real sweetheart deal.
They had a hell of a sweetheart deal. And the Brits were going to lose it, and they were pissed about that. So,
and of course, the Americans wanted to keep that flow of petroleum.
Yeah, they wanted
to keep the world price low. Yeah.
And then, and so then the Dulles brothers, and they went in and they overthrew him and reinstalled the Shah. And
it was like, hey, that was easy. That worked.
Yeah, it worked.
So it encouraged them. Yeah. And then, and Korea was successful in that you pretty much returned to the 1950 border.
Yeah.
You know, mind you, Truman Doctrine. Yeah, Truman Doctrine I think was before Korea, or at least came out of Korea anyway.
Probably came out or was.
But Korea's always going to be an aberration.
Yeah.
Because the Soviets.
It wasn't an insurgent war either. It was a full
conventional. But it was still an attempt by the communist world to expand.
Yeah.
But the fact that the UN went and fought, and I don't know if China had veto power at the time.
No, they did not, because
but Russia
China's seat was controlled by Taiwan, which was on the U.S. side.
So they didn't have. So they weren't part of the
PR. The Russians abstained, didn't they?
The Russians were boycotting it, and that's how the Americans got the vote through.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, the Russians boycotted, not thinking that the Americans would go so far as to have a Security Council vote without every seat there. Yeah. And the Americans said, "You fucking watch me."
I'm gonna go for a smoke.
Okay.
When you
go by the washroom, can you just push the button on the toilet again?
The Russians never ever again boycotted a Security Council vote.
Yeah.
Ever. Not the Soviet Union, not the Russians, not nobody. Which I think is really interesting. But they totally overestimated.
Just have to push the button again, and the float will go down.
I think they totally overestimated the appeal.
I pushed them both, so it should be alright.
Like, I think these were guys who...
Still sticking there?
I don't know, I was watching to see if it was coming up. So.
They totally...
I'll check on the way back.
Overestimated. Again, like, this is like my idea, like, make them run it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the number one thing that stopped further insurgencies in Nicaragua were the Nicaraguans.
Yeah.
Or not Nicaragua, in Central America. The reason communism did not spread to succeed in El Salvador or Costa Rica or British Honduras or Panama was because people looked at Nicaragua and said, we don't fucking want that.
Yeah.
That's why it didn't spread. Like, they tried one in...
Didn't Ortega just get reelected?
Yeah, but how valuable are those elections?
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not really up on the Central.
I mean, yeah. Like,
other than they're still dealing with...
Ortega's elections are not exactly...
Hey everyone, just before this next clip, I wanted to make a note of a couple mistakes I made in it. just because I'm the guy who edits this, and so I can. In this clip, I make a mistake where I say that American spending bills originate in the Senate, which they actually originate in the House of Representatives, which I knew that at the time, so I don't know why I made that mistake, but I did. And then we were talking about the Supreme Court appointments of the Trump administration, and for some reason I got in my head that Justice Kavanaugh replaced Alito, who had retired. And of course, Alito is actually still serving on the court. And Brett Kavanaugh actually replaced Anthony Kennedy, who retired. So that's all. Just correcting some of my mistakes because I can. So thanks.
He was reelected in 2006.
No, Obama was.
So Obama was after that.
Obama was elected in 2008.
Yeah.
Bush's re-election was 2004.
Yeah.
2004.
Yeah. Because it was still the Iraq War.
Yes.
So yeah, 2008, and it wasn't until Obama's second term that I'm not placing blame here. I'm just saying that I think the spokesman who really, I don't think he originated it either, but the conservative thinker who really articulated this and propagated this message of the left being a moral corruption was Ben Shapiro. And I don't think he really came to prominence until Obama's second term.
I would agree with
So
that. He
I'm
was
going to
pretty
say
young.
around 2010, 2012, that's when conservatism began to see the left as a moral evil abomination.
Yeah, Shapiro published his first book like right after he graduated university. He graduated young, like he was 21 or 22.
Yeah.
But here's
So that's what I mean by bipartisan hatred.
Yeah, but I mean that's that your statement itself can cut both ways, right? The right started seeing the left in these absolute
like moral terms.
moral terms.
Yeah.
Right? No less than the right started seeing that. What I think there's two things that occurred in the period in question.
Say around 2010-ish, 2012-ish.
Well, in the Obama era, let's call it the Obama era.
Second Obama term. Yeah.
What happened in Obama's first election was, for the first time that I remember, he successfully leveraged Twitter.
I'd say,
Was Twitter even a thing then?
I think it was.
One way or the other.
He successfully leveraged social media.
Absolutely, yes.
Right?
I would say that's probably
And
a better
that was
statement.
part of the Obama. Yeah. Now I'm going to say that.
And I think that made him unique. He was the first guy to really harness the power.
Right, and at that
of
time,
non-traditional
it
media.
still wasn't a negative thing, right? It hadn't reached the proportions that it had by the time Trump.
Hold on. Do you mean
Trump
that
perverted
social media was a negative thing, or harnessing the power?
harnessing the power?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I think fundamentally, the most important thing that Obama did was during the election, leading up to the election, was his campaign, and that also helped for me. It helped define, at least his first term in a lot of ways, right? But for the first time, I remember watching the "Yes You Can" speech for the first time. I thought, "Holy fuck!"
He was an electrifying speaker.
This was
Very good.
Oh, he was fantastic.
That speech is up there with
I have a dream, and ask not what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Ask not what you can do for your country, or ask not what your country can do for you. Yeah.
We hadn't had anything like that since the electrifying times in the 60s, right? And so and that is one of the reasons he won that election, because he managed to propagate an optimistic message to America, and Americans bought into it. So at that point, I see the left as being very, very positive,
very dynamic.
right? But it was very
even
hopeful.
then you could see because you could see the corruption right at the hop, right? Because they gave him a Nobel Peace Prize before he was elected for not doing a damn thing.
Yeah, he got a Nobel Peace Prize before he even took office.
So, but here's
Right? Like,
that was kind of funny, wasn't it?
Right? And he did a campaign speech in Germany. Right? Like one of the biggest turnouts for one of his speeches during the campaign was in Berlin.
Yeah, it was in Berlin. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there you're just channeling JFK, anyways, right?
But JFK was president
in the
at the
age
time.
of social media, it doesn't matter where you make the speech.
No.
It could be in Berlin. It could be in Topeka. It's going to reach the same number of people.
I've always argued this, and again, going back to my previous statement, one of the most important things that Obama did was to unite the United States and the world with this electrifying optimism. And you couple that with being the first black man to be, he hadn't been elected yet, but he was the first.
He was the first black office holder, or of the presidency. Yeah.
Well, prior to that, he was the first one to run.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true.
For a major party. So I think in those ways, there is an argument to be made that justifies.
I don't think there was ever. I don't think a black guy ever won the nomination of.
No, nobody won the nomination, but he's not the first guy. I don't know that he was the first black guy to run for a party.
Yeah, but that's
Well,
what
no,
you mean.
because
You mean like to win the nomination.
To win the
of
nomination.
party.
Certainly, yeah.
Right? Jesse Jackson tried.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
exactly,
never did.
yeah,
Yeah,
right?
but he never got the nomination.
So my argument would be that there is an argument that justifies the Nobel Peace Prize before he got elected, right? I'm going to fast forward, then I'm going to rewind again, right? I'm going to fast.
I would be happier with the Nobel Committee if they would have taken his Peace Prize back after the vandalism of Libya. Because
and this is one of the things I hate about our company, because we're all over the place. He's now got two streams of consciousness I want to throw on the table.
All right, sorry.
Steve, you fucked him.
Sorry.
So
back up and we'll
give me a
figure
quick set.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Table that.
Now
We need a whiteboard, that we can put down these
Oh
things.
fuck
right?
yeah! We need like the Sherlock Holmes string of
Yeah.
connected things. Right?
We'll just get like a
are we
pedal mic, so
recording
you
this?
just stand in front of the board as you move shit around, right?
We are recording this, right?
Oh yeah.
Thank God.
Okay, so anyway,
So I got three things to say in
Yeah.
succession, and one of them is to respond to you.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Okay.
All right. One is by 2012, Trump
Yeah.
successfully leveraged social media.
Was it? No, it was
But-
2016, wasn't it? That he was elected.
Oh, 2016. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So for his campaign, but by then society had changed, and he had, to me, in my
Yes.
mind, he
Yes.
had perverted the use of it in the same way that Obama hadn't. Right. So that's statement number one. Statement number two is during the Obama years, somewhere in there, and this kind of speaks to what you say about the right looking at the left and going, okay, the left is this.
Like through moral terms.
Yeah,
Yeah. Not terms
this
of
horrible
efficacy,
because the
but
left,
of morality.
the left has not done itself any favors in the last 10 years, right? And one of the reasons for that is, and I think I've mentioned it before on the podcast, is the concept of not having to tolerate intolerance, right? That came out sometime in the last 10 years, and the left embraced it, right? The only thing I don't have to tolerate is intolerance.
Yeah.
Right?
Like
it's,
kind of like an absolutism.
well, but yeah, and they've turned this paradox into an absolute. But this is to a generation that's completely incapable of context and critical thinking, right? So they've decided in their own narcissistic way that whatever I have decided is acceptable, the mirror image of that is unacceptable and is therefore the definition of something that isn't to be tolerated, and therefore I don't have to tolerate it. And that is driving from the left, this absolute, just this. Well, what Peterson speaks to,
Like an ideological brinksmanship,
Well,
an
just-
all or
well,
nothing
it's
kind
just
of
this-
approach.
this: if you disagree with me, you are evil, right? So that's coming from the left, just as much as it's coming from the right. And personally, I abhor that thinking from both sides.
Should we actually listen to this?
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
actually-
Let's hit this.
Very quickly, want to respond to what you said. If you're going to talk about,
Whoops.
Oh, it's Tinder.
Yeah.
He got a match.
I wish.
He's swiping.
No, I'm just trying to put that on Do Not Disturb.
Swiping again. No, now he's swiping left. Now he's swiping right.
and he's lying about it. He's lying about
He's
it.
lying about it. Like, why? Why, Steve? Why?
It's
why?
okay. We love you,
Why?
buddy.
These are nice girls. They're from good families. Why do you break their hearts like this?
I was just listening on the way home. I was just listening to. Do you know who Travis Haley is?
No.
He was former Marine. He's one of the more notorious shooting instructors in the States. And he's listening to he was talking to Tyler Gray. And you probably wrote to Tyler. There's a show on CBS. It's on Paramount Plus called SEAL Team. Tyler Gray is an actor in that show.
Who does he play on SEAL Team?
Trent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Tyler Gray was in Delta.
Oh, really?
Like
before he became an actor?
Before he became an actor. He was in Delta. He was kind of brief because he got blown up in his arm. He got really canked up in his first deployment with Delta. But he was...
So he's medically released?
Yeah, so he's medically released after that.
But at least brings a little bit of experiential authenticity to
Yeah.
the role.
He was in Delta, qualified soldier in Delta.
Okay, I love that show, and it was Trent and the other guy who ran the dog in SEAL Team, whose name I can never remember. They were bit players, but they were authentic.
Yeah.
Right. You know.
Well, and then there was one guy they killed off at the end last season or season before.
Full Metal.
Full Metal. He was an actual SEAL as well.
Oh wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. There was a few guys. Like originally there was like the team was 6 guys and it was focused on 3 or 4 actors, and then everyone else had been a real operator. So,
Oh wow.
yeah, had been
Interesting.
There was
Okay.
like 3 SEALs and then Tyler Gray who was Delta.
So anyway, so this guy, the
So, but
shooting
there's,
stuff
he was
was
talking about how before he got blown up and he's cocky and he's like, and he was talking about if I went on a date, just talking about the Tinder and how they're nice girls. He's like, yeah, if I went on a date and there were no daddy issues, I was gone.
There were no daddy issues. I was
But
gone.
he say if I detected a lack of daddy issues or father issues, see ya, have a nice life.
Did you guys see that Duffel blog article where the guy's saying how this guy from the U.S. Marines gets released because he had a healthy and a healthy and loving relationship with his father? We don't want that. This big senior guy saying, that's just not representative of the kind of person we want in the Marine Corps, and it's not the values that we stand for. This guy, he seemed normal. He seemed to fit in. Like there were no red flags about him all through Paris Island and in a battalion. He looked good, but then we found out that he had a healthy and loving relationship with his father, and we had to take action.
There was another one that was. And it wasn't like that. It was just like Marine returns home to find his wife has not spent all his money and run off with something else.
Yeah, exactly.
And the kids are fine and in school and everything.
Yeah, finances were healthy. And,
Yeah.
She hasn't had children with some other guy.
No, yeah. She wasn't a stripper to begin with.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about, you would have been happier if the Nobel Committee had rescinded once the corruption surrounding Libya came up, right? I mean, and this is something we run into Canadian politics as well, cyclically. But in particular in the last 20 years of American politics, okay, so we could debate the specifics of Benghazi, right? And anything else we want from the Obama administration. But the left can always come back. And this is the loop that we're stuck in these days, right? The left can come back, and I'm not intending to open this as a subject.
You're just using it as an example.
Meltdown of 2008, right? Which, if nothing else, happened on his watch, on Bush II's watch.
Yeah.
Sure.
You had the invasion of Iraq and WMD and all the bullshit that went with that, right? If you want to talk tin hat theory, if there's one that I come close to kind of scratching my head and rubbing my chin about and raising my eyebrows, it's going to be the collapse of the towers, right? So, and everything that goes that. Now, do I really believe that or not? I don't know, but right. So
I want to talk more about that, but I guess probably not.
Maybe that'll be a separate episode.
but then we can go back.
Whiteboard.
Then we can go back to Clinton. What I find, and this is where I'm going to point a finger at the right, because I find
Dirty buggers.
when it comes to corruption especially at the executive level, I find that the crimes are greater on the Republican side. I'm not saying they don't exist on the Democratic side, but they're greater, and the Republicans tend to blow them off. The only time that anyone's been held accountable on either side of the aisle is Nixon. And he should have been.
Sure.
And I can't remember whether it was Bush or Reagan, Bush 1 or Reagan, for the Ollie North and the Contragate, right? Ollie North took the fall, but guaranteed.
Yeah, Ollie took the fall, but yeah, right? I mean, Reagan was in the
right? So that should have happened there. And that outweighs, whatever it was Clinton did, in terms of cigar and and his aide, and Monica Lewinsky. Right now, I'm not saying that was right or correct. I'm not there to
I
debate
kind
that
of
either.
consider
It's just-
that was kind of a manufactured scandal anyway.
Yeah, it's like
Lewinsky?
Yeah. Like, so what? Like, okay,
I mean,
I'm not saying it was right. I mean, yeah, the guy committed adultery. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But in the big scheme of things, did it impact his ability to what
govern
laws
the
were
country.
broken? What laws were broken? Like,
Yeah, exactly. What laws
Yeah.
were broken?
statutory rape.
no.
She wasn't 21 yet.
Yes, she
I think
was.
she was.
Yes.
Not that it
Okay,
matters,
again, I'm not. Okay,
I'm certain. But
Okay, so
but-
she was. So
okay.
it wasn't. Then none. That would
Yeah,
have been
I mean,
the only
like,
one.
if we're gonna,
And it's not like Kennedy. You're right. Like, it's
I mean,
not like Kennedy didn't
if-
dick
if-
everything he couldn't.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
and he's still a liberal icon.
if
Yeah.
we
worldwide.
are, if
And
we're,
Martin Luther King, even Martin Luther King was quite
Yeah.
the philanderer.
yeah, if we're gonna nail guys to the wall for doing that, like, okay, how many presidents of France are still left standing at this point?
Yeah. Or
Yeah,
President
but-
Italy, or
Well, yeah, or anyone, right?
But to be fair, that's filtered through the lens of French politics. right?
I
So,
think it was
Still, though, I mean,
there was an issue because Monica was what, first term?
I think, yeah,
I think she was.
No,
So he
no,
was-
maybe it's.
I think it might have been second term.
I think it was
So we're
second
talking-
term, because I remember thinking at the time that the real driving force behind it was anger that they could not beat that guy, like electorally.
There was
Yeah, it would have been after the
frustration.
midterms because
Yeah.
they had control of the House.
because
Or
the
it was-
Republicans had control of the House.
Oh
Newt
yeah,
Gingrich was
oh
Speaker
yes,
of the House. Yeah.
because that's
There
how they
was
were
a-
able to
and-
get the special prosecutor,
And
but they
Republicans were
couldn't
in a
get him
real
out of the White
moralistic
House.
streak at the time too, right? Like,
Well,
or at least they were playing
Well,
it.
yeah, I
because-
think they were playing that.
And these are the times that I point to, like using the examples I did, and there's a few more. That's why I see hypocrisy at the political level essentially being owned by the right.
I'm not trying to contradict you. I'm just trying to, I guess, context because I have
No, absolutely.
a predisposition to over contextualizing everything, which why it takes me three
all
times
good.
as long to tell stories. As
But I
she
mean, if you look at all the figures from the right, from the Falwells to like Jim Baker, there's been plenty of instances of infidelity. On the right.
evangelical Christianity took a big hit in the 80s and 90s.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
But somehow they keep going after the left for the same thing, right? And they always squirm out of accountability at all levels, right? Nixon being the exception, right? So anytime anyone brings up, I'm not saying
again,
as I've seen 13 Hours,
yeah,
right? I feel for that. I identify with the guys on the ground there. And before I'd seen that movie, I'd only heard about Benghazi kind of in passing and stuff. I still don't even know what the scandal is. But
I think it was more incompetence than
Well, the
Nefarious.
scandal was like there was a U.S. Special Forces.
Yeah.
Contextualization.
yeah.
The Special Forces guys had small versions of Delta
Yeah.
around the world in all their big bases, right? So
Okay.
in Japan, in Korea, each group would have something called a Commanders and Extremist Force. Mm-hmm. And so it's basically like they're special forces. They're not in Delta, but they're assaulters. They're not.
Yeah. Door
Okay.
kickers.
So there's a Commanders and Extremist Force in Italy at Aviano, co-located with the 173rd Independent Airborne Brigade.
it was like a
They
fire,
could have been in
fire
Benghazi
brigade,
in a couple hours
Yeah.
from when shit kicked off, and air support could have flown out of Aviano,
Yeah.
and the secretary who was SecDef at the time, that would Clinton was Secretary of State,
yeah.
and
I don't know
SecDef
who
was
SecDef was, yeah.
Panetta at the time.
Who knows?
Anyway, but they shut it down. They're like, oh, I won't get there in time. I mean, those guys fought all night, right? They could have, a Hercules, like an AC-130 could have been out of Aviano.
Out of Aviano,
and
it would take
and have been
an
there
hour
in
and a
four.
half, right?
Well, out of Aviano would have probably been 4 hours for a Herc. But like a Globemaster and guys who could have jumped in
Yeah.
could have been there in an hour and a half or 2 hours, right? And they just kibosh. They did get a couple Delta guys.
Yeah, they
Right,
did.
because
Yeah.
that's
I
the
remember
movie
that
where
in
they
the
pick
film.
up the two,
Yeah,
they pick up the two Delta guys in Tripoli, and those guys were there for the big gun
the
fight.
big push. Yeah.
But they were primarily trying to help the CIA destroy their documents.
But
But again,
my
I kind
point
of
is-
chalk that more up to incompetence than malfeasance.
Yeah,
And that's a lot coming from you.
Yeah.
Like, I have
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah.
Right? Like, is you applied the malfeasance brush to a lot of shit.
A lot of shit. A lot of shit.
So-
Yes. That's kind of like if the Red Army exonerated you for war crimes in the Second World War. That was pretty good, right? If the Soviet Tribunal lets you go. Before you go any further,
Actually, I think I was more or less done.
okay, and I don't want to delay this any longer, but just take a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
What do you see as the major, let's go back to the Kennedy administration and use that as, and just talking about America.
Yeah.
Go back to the Camelot there.
Yeah.
What do you see as the major, go scroll through the decades in 5-year increments. What do you see as the major scandals that came out of the Republicans? I'm not going to argue with you on a single one. I'm interested in your thoughts.
Well, I mean, Nixon is Nixon, right? Watergate is Watergate.
Watergate,
You know,
yeah.
and it's
I
kind
mean,
of
Watergate is the eponymous thing. Every scandal
exactly.
is something
now,
gate.
Now it's a gate.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it is kind of the lens through which all others
Are viewed, yeah.
are viewed,
Yeah.
right? And have somehow failed. And I suspect that's more of a cultural thing. We've moved on. This is not 1972, 73 anymore, right? So no one's holding people up to those standards, right? But what are they? I mean, really, Contragate was a big one. It should have been a big
Iran-Contra
one,
affair?
right? It was, it was. I mean, you're selling arms.
What was the link to the Iranians on that?
They were
That's what
selling.
they sold the guns to generate the cash to give to the Contras.
Oh, I thought they gave the guns to the Contras. Okay,
No.
gotcha,
They sold the weapons to the Iranians to make the money to give to the
I
Contras.
remember. Yes.
And
To
those-
the
and-
Shah, or not
and-
the Shah.
No,
to the Ayatollahs. Right.
And I think it was
Because
also
they
there
sold
was
it through the Israelis, I think.
Right. Which is ironic.
Yeah.
and there was drug running on the part of the Contras. Which if I remember
yeah.
correctly, the Contras got spanked for that.
Well, that
and
was
therefore they couldn't use that as a source of income anymore. So now we're going to sell parts to the Iranians
Yeah.
so that.
Well,
to prop up the
drug
Contras,
running
yeah.
was another way of generating cash to fight communism.
Yeah,
in Central
and it was
America.
pretty
So that's-
common.
So that's why the CIA
also,
was so heavily involved in it. Because they were
the
trying to generate black budget income.
in Sendero Luminoso and FARC were also heavily involved in the drug trade. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
for anybody down there, I mean, it was an indispensable part of
the FARC
war.
in Colombia
Well,
were
FARC still
definitely
is.
getting.
Yeah.
They were getting. That helped fund their revolution.
Yeah,
to
totally.
provide security
Yeah.
for the drug lords. Right?
Okay, so that's early '80s.
That's actually. I'd say that's the big one.
Iran-Contra,
Iran-Contra.
bigger than Watergate. Okay, so
Well, I mean, it was probably more significant
both
than
were
Watergate in its own way, but Watergate was more of an existential concept. Which is,
so late '80s. Let's now. Okay, so Iran-Contra was Reagan. How about Herbert Walker Bush? He was pretty clean cut,
He didn't really have one.
and he only had one term.
He only had the one term.
He only had the one term.
I mean, you could probably put a lot of shit at Bush's feet, but mostly from the 70s when he was director of CIA.
Yeah, but not really as president. Though.
Not really as president.
and not really corruption.
No. Well, no more than common, because
exactly.
and maybe unethical.
he's the ultimate establishment
Yeah.
guy. He'd been in DC for a long time.
it's
He'd
true,
been in
yeah.
a couple Senate runs.
Yeah.
You know, he was.
Yeah.
He was.
But
was
yeah,
the
he didn't
ultimate.
really have anything that stuck to him to his presidency.
And
then
then you fast forward to Iraq 2 and WMD, right? I mean, that's
Yep.
um,
Well,
and then you can tack Blair onto that, right? Because that
Blair.
Tony Blair. I mean, that's
With
what Britain was doing going
right,
onto that,
right, yeah.
especially from. I don't care if it was.
it certainly
New
wasn't in
Labour.
their interest, but Tony Blair
And New Labour.
got along really well for some reason.
They sure did.
Despite
They sure
the fact
did.
that he was
He was the most conservative
Labor
leader
guy
ever.
ever, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Okay, and then
Probably
so
more
then
conservative
so
than
now
Labour,
we're
but-
gone into WMD. How about Trump?
Well, I mean, okay. So Trump has set new standards.
Okay, what was
And-
his biggest scandal? Do you think? If you had to, two. What is big two?
Well, I mean,
Like severe ethical lapses
Ukraine was the big one.
with Trump.
Yeah.
What did he do with Ukraine?
he got-
no,
he
sorry,
got-
I'm
he
thinking
got
the war.
impeached over that.
No, he was gonna hold back aid unless
Unless they gave him some dirt on Biden.
On Biden, yeah.
Right.
Well,
What-
actually, he wanted them to conduct an investigation
Right, into Biden.
into Biden.
Okay. What did you think Biden was doing? Pay for play?
Pay for play, yeah.
Okay.
Because Hunter was on the board of
Right.
the Ukrainian energy company.
Right. And so
And with
Trump
no
wanted
previous-
evidence of it. Okay.
But I mean, once you start picking at that scab, I mean, you just
Okay.
you just try to
What
hold
else?
it.
Is there another one?
It just
I want to table one other thing about Trump before we leave today. Where I'm going to write this down. I got my whiteboard right here, boys.
It's his fitness as a leader.
No.
As
Give me a
in so many-
scandal.
no, in
Give me
so
something I
many-
can really sink my
Well,
teeth
I mean,
into.
there's so many-
Besides January 6th?
right?
Yeah. How about January 6th?
Yeah.
How about that?
That's the
Yeah.
obvious one, isn't it?
Okay, what? Okay.
The incitement of the riot.
Yeah. I don't
I don't
really.
call it an insurrection,
but I
but it
mean-
was a riot. for
I
sure.
don't think he
The guy
really
is
did
a-
much to. Like I'd have a
Well,
hard
then,
time
I
packing
think
that
it's-
one to
I think
Trump.
it's
Enough
response-
evidence saying that that there was at least some
Yeah.
informal.
But speaking from someone else's
Coordination.
perspective, I often hear Trump
You're
being
right.
attached
That's
to
huge.
that.
But I mean, you just under the word Trump, the guy's a walking lawsuit, right? Even before he ran for president, even while he was president, just
If you had to choose for this top two, I'm going to throw another one at you,
yeah,
and I want you to know if this displaces January 6th or not. The Steele dossier.
no,
No? Why not?
Well, that's
Because
not
it
his
hasn't been
scandal.
You just, hey, Mr. right-wing libertarian over there, just
Okay, shit.
because it hasn't-
again, work your side of the street. Holy
First
cats.
of all,
Well, as a libertarian guy, Trump is not my guy either.
Well, okay. If you're going to be
Okay.
that way about it.
the Steele dossier,
Yep.
to my knowledge, has not
Yep.
been substantiated.
Okay.
And who cares,
Okay.
right?
Okay, how about Russia
Not only is it not
collusion?
substantiated, it's been debunked.
Okay, so
Oh
so
my
there you go.
God, you guys and your facts. Okay, how about just Russia collusion, period?
Well, yeah, that's huge.
Okay, go
Except
on.
there's no evidence of it,
Well, the Steele dossier.
No,
which has been debunked.
Yes. I mean, if you want to, okay, if you guys are going to insist on living in reality, okay, forget the damn Steele dossier. But how about, was there any Russia collusion aside from Steele?
can I quote evidence right now? No.
There was a
Okay,
Right? I think
give me
that-
your gut.
that
What
there
is
are
your gut say?
There are enough leading indicators.
So you're kind of saying smoke, there's a lot of smoke, maybe there's fire.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
What's your smoke?
But fundamentally, what it comes down to is just his whole term in office
Mm-hmm.
is a freaking gong show. Right?
So-
there's nothing substantive to come out of it. He comes into it. Why he gets so much support from the common man
nothing
when
substantive?
he is ripped off so many
On-
people.
Nothing substantive to come out of his administration.
Oh, okay.
Hold on! That's the other thing I wanted to talk to about, or talked about Trump about. So
Despite only
just
having
hold
one,
on,
Hang
All
on.
right, fine.
because we're going into that. Okay.
All right.
But anyway,
You know,
we're talking about
just-
you were saying the entire totality of his time in office was just so laden with ethical violations.
Well, not just that. It's just ineptitude. It's this the superficiality of his presidency from throwing rolls of paper towel at hurricane survivors in Puerto Rico to the speeches he gives. It's
For
like the
me,
guy doesn't have a
it
fucking
was
clue, right?
it was his cabinet shuffles. How he brought in, like at the very beginning of his administration, I thought his cabinet picks were really solid. And then how he just got rid of them on whims. You know, it was
His
crazy.
big one, well, most of it was them quitting, but his,
Well, same thing.
Well, yeah, because
where
he
they
was
just said,
driving
"Look,
them nuts because-
I can't work with this guy."
Yeah,
And then they-
Exactly, and there were ethical considerations.
Yeah.
except for the ones he didn't care about because he just left them alone, right? Like Betsy DeVos,
yeah,
as Secretary of Education, she stayed in the whole term until
Yeah.
January 6th, and then she resigned
Yeah.
on like January 7th
yeah.
over his response in January 6th.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but it's not
but
like
he didn't care about the Department of Education, so he just left her alone.
he just
right?
left her alone.
Yeah, and
Right?
depending on who you talk to,
And
a lot of people are
Mattis-
unhappy about what she did.
I
too,
thought,
so,
well,
right?
yes, but again, depending on who you talk to,
Yeah.
I think a lot of Republicans, and small C conservatives, thought she did a fantastic
and
job.
classical liberals and stuff like that because
Yeah.
she got rid of the Title IX letters
Yeah.
that was basically
Yeah.
responsible for a lot of male students'
Yeah.
lives being ruined because
Yeah.
the way that the Title IX under Obama, they had this thing called the Title IX letter, which was basically dictating to colleges how they were supposed to handle
All
sexual assault and
and
sexual
impropriety,
accusation
yeah.
or sexual harassment accusations.
where it was basically guilty until proven
Proven
innocent.
innocent, right? And you couldn't face your accuser, you couldn't
Yeah.
do anything, right? So a lot of guys were ejected out of colleges
Yeah.
for accusations, and she
Yeah.
reversed that. And her whole thing was going into the Department of Education was like there shouldn't be a federal Department of Education,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's
So-
a state level.
It should be a
Yeah.
state level thing,
Yeah. And which is a very Republican thing. What do you say? Decentralization of government. So while we're on this point, I know you wanted to bring it up. I'm interested in bringing it up. I was in a discussion with an American fellow, a very, very intelligent American fellow, and someone who I idolize, but he is a passionate Democrat.
Is this someone well known or?
No. Just
Just a friend of
a former colleague and someone who I would be very, very flattered if I could call him a mentor. But we were talking about obstructionism. And I had to I was trying to think of, examples of say, like, to use the standard, the yardstick is Obamacare as like a flagship initiative of a administration
Yeah.
that was blocked and opposed by a Republican-controlled Congress. What was the equivalent of that in the Trump year?
It was the.
Well, just to finish, I couldn't think of two major initiatives that Trump had.
Well, there actually is one, but you've mentioned it.
Like
And it
maybe
was-
the wall?
No, it was trying to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something.
Trump was the obstruction there.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
Trump was the instruction there because they were talking about this actually in commentary podcast last week. Paul Ryan came up with a plan, and Paul Ryan's plan was initially like we're going to repeal Obamacare, but we're going to leave it in place for 2 years, and we'll use that 2 years to come up with our own plan because it wasn't a plan at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
And Trump was like repeal and replace now. I'll veto anything that is not repeal and replace right now. And
Okay.
Trump was the so it ended up with the Republicans. All they did was got rid of the individual mandate.
So in my mind, I'm going to argue that you're splitting hairs there. All right, because
he was the obstruction to repealing Obamacare because
but it was also his vision. He talked about it all the time. We're going to repeal Obamacare.
Sure,
We're
yeah.
going to be repeal.
Yeah.
So the fact that he got in his own way for doing that,
But
doesn't
he
mean
can't
it wasn't
really.
one of his.
It's not something that he could really do.
Well, no, he couldn't.
No,
because
because
they
he
need
can't.
those 2
He
years.
can't
There's no
initiate.
question,
He
right?
can't
They had to
initiate
come up with
legislation.
well, but
as the
yeah. That's the
president.
other thing is as a president,
He can't initiate it. He can only say
legislation
no.
initiates in the Senate or the House. It doesn't, right? And spending initiates in the Senate.
Yeah,
But,
but as a thing that he wanted to achieve, I can't really.
Well,
There was the tax breaks he saw through.
Well,
Yeah.
no.
That's the
Yeah.
one thing he achieved.
Yeah,
There's three big legacies to the
Yeah,
Trump
I would say
administration.
that, yeah.
There's three big legacies to the Trump administration. Two of them are accidents. Okay.
Yeah.
No, completely. Two of them are
Okay.
accidents. First one, 3 Supreme Court justices.
okay.
Those are accidents.
Yeah.
Second one,
What do you mean accidents?
well, because
They only happened to happen under his watch.
Scalia died.
Yeah. Okay.
No, yeah, Scalia
okay,
died.
yeah.
Okay, so that was Mitch McConnell.
So in other words,
Scalia
it was
died
just
and Mitch-
fortune that it
Yeah.
laid to Trump to make those appointments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Scalia died. Mitch McConnell
Yeah.
was running the Senate at the
Yeah.
time, and he wouldn't
He wouldn't confirm.
he wouldn't even bring it to a hearing for Merrick Garland. Right. So then Trump wins the election. Boom. First thing they do is replace Scalia. Then
And
did
who-
Leo retire?
Who
No.
did he bring in place of Scalia? Was it Gorsuch?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was Gorsuch.
Yeah.
And then or maybe it
And
was
Merrick Garland was Obama's.
was Obama's pick.
Right.
Yeah. And now he's Attorney General.
Right.
And
Oh
then,
yeah, that's right.
And
Okay.
then Was it 3 or 2? Maybe I'm getting the numbers wrong. But anyway. And then
Ruth Bader Ginsburg
Ruth
died,
Bader
so
Ginsburg
that was
died.
second or
Passed,
third,
yep.
right?
Yeah.
So I think it was only the two. But I mean,
Ruth
then-
Bader
and then was
Ginsburg died, and
Kavanaugh.
he gets Amy Coney Barrett.
No, wasn't Kavanaugh before Barrett?
Oh yeah, so
Well, that's
no, it
right,
was 3. Then the
Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh came in. So Gorsuch, and then Kavanaugh,
Yeah.
and
And
then
then who was the third one? What was the other vacancy? The third
it
vacancy.
was Ruth Bader Ginsburg died.
So who was the second vacancy?
I want to say, did Alito retire? Or
maybe it was.
Kennedy.
I can't remember.
Was it a retirement?
Yeah, there was a retirement.
Wasn't a
Yeah,
pass-
it was one of the conservative guys retired.
Okay. And okay. So
And
then he
so
brings
they
in
replaced with
Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh, and they tried to pull
And
Clarence
then-
Thomas.
Okay,
with him.
so is
Yeah.
that 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3? You
Gorsuch,
said-
Kavanaugh, Coney Barrett. There's 3.
No, but you were saying that there were 3 achievements under his
No,
watch.
it's one of the 3.
One of
Okay,
the-
you're
one of
counting the
3
Supreme
Court
Court
is
Yeah.
one achievement.
is
Okay.
his great legacy. Yeah.
Second one, another accident, Abraham Accords, and is primarily to Trump.
Abraham Accords.
Yeah.
Refresh me.
Well, Israel making peace with Saudi Arabia
Oh, of course.
okay.
and
Of course.
and a bunch of other Middle Eastern and Qatar and UAE,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right? And coming to those. And that's again an accident. I think the State Department probably had a little bit of hand in helping negotiate
Yeah,
it. But,
yeah.
but primarily the cause of it was Trump's behavior so erratically. Israelis realized we can't count on this asshole. We got to.
Yeah. We need to
Or
reach an
everybody,
accord
all
here. Yeah.
America's allies in the Middle East realize
Yeah.
that we gotta.
Yeah.
That this is going to be a.
Yeah.
Many hands make lighter work or whatever against.
Yeah.
Iran,
There's
right?
both sides kind of said
Right,
this guy
so-
is.
And then the third one was, which probably has the most checkered legacy given, but it was Project Lightspeed, which was what incentivized the manufacture of the mRNA vaccine so quickly.
Can I add another one onto there? And that was, I would say, the transformation of China in the American consciousness
As the main adversary.
as the main adversary, because that was not how would you say,
or as he would say,
overturned.
China.
Yeah, that was
I mean-
not. Oh God! Don't even get me started on the industry of Trump impersonations.
Have you seen Ron Perlman's? Ron Perlman, the guy from
Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah,
from Beauty and the Beast. The
yeah.
actor.
He does a Trump impersonation.
He did one on Good Morning America. It was fucking hilarious.
But the
I have not seen
Biden administration has not attempted to reset that. They have held that status quo. So I would put that as a if you do something that your other party successor does not overturn, then I count that as your legacy.
I don't know. My impression of Trump for during his presidency was he was kind of wishy-washy on China in terms of whether they were good or bad. I seem to remember at
Put
times,
a
given
huge
this,
number of sanctions on him.
Did.
Yeah, just because
But-
he was like he was mad about Chinese currency manipulation and stuff like that. So
And trade deficit.
trade deficits.
But
and stuff like
about
that.
that a
if
lot.
you're talking about the
insanely
common perception
protectionist.
amongst the American people of the Chinese as the enemy,
As
you
an
know, that-
adversary, yeah.
I'm pretty sure, like my recollection, I might be wrong, but he was sitting there praising Xi Jinping just as much as he was praising.
I think that was Trudeau. Praising Xi Jinping?
Yeah, same as he was praising
Recall.
North Korea, right? Same as he was praising Putin. The one set of people he consistently had criticism for was NATO.
I was going to say Canada and Mexico.
There's that too, right?
Well, okay,
I mean,
okay.
because he did
Okay,
also
and-
he did
Yeah,
renegotiate a free trade agreement as well. in the
Totally.
entire time.
And he bent both of us, Canada and Mexico. He really got us.
And in answer to your previous question, we haven't even
Yeah.
touched on his views on immigration, which again plays into the populism that that his base is made of. Who, I was about to say, I cannot believe support him as much as he does, because he's fucked over so many small businesses over his lifetime, and he just keeps tying them up in court. But people don't care about that.
another
stuff. He's a
legacy.
fucking winner.
That I'm going to attribute to the Trump era, not to Trump, not the individual, but to the era. And I don't, legacy is jumping the gun on this because it might be too soon. But seeds were planted from 2016 to 2020, positioning the Republican Party as the party of the blue-collar working class and the Democratic Party as
the representative of the white collar managerial class or administrative class.
Right.
A schism between people who worked with their hands and people who worked with information. Now, I don't know if the Republican Party in the United States is smart enough to capitalize on that. But I do see that kind of spreading, specifically in Canada and Australia.
Well, I mean, but that's always been the case. You don't even have to look in Canada in particular. You don't have to look farther than Alberta to see that, the working class vote it can go one of two radical directions. And one is like, always blue, like from a Canadian point of view, always voting Tory, like never anything but Tory. My daddy, my grandpappy, we all voted Tory, never going to vote anything else.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that at the working class
and
level.
that dividing line on that one was usually whether you like unions or not as an employee, right?
Yeah.
Like my dad helped me become a person of the right by my dad was always self-employed, and I've come to realize as of late that self-sufficiency and his ability to and never having to ask anyone usually for help is kind of like my dad's reason for being.
That was very important to him.
Is extremely important to him. Like there's times like we've been like, oh, well, we need this tool. Well, I can make it. We can go rent it, right? Or whatever. Yeah. I'll make it, or even buying the thing, right? Like, okay, well, you're going to spend 2 days building this thing, and it won't work. And if you go buy the thing for $500 or $1,000 or whatever,
next time.
This could be a complex task, and this thing will do like all 5 steps of this complex task, and we'll get the job done in 2 minutes. And but whereas the tool you're going to build will only do the hardest of the 5 steps. Right. So it's just kind of stuff like that. And
sometimes he stepped over $1 to reach a dime. But,
there was a lot of that going on, right?
You're right.
But that union or the pro or anti-union divide was usually like whether they went Tory or NDP.
Yeah,
and so,
but I mean, to me that's such a simplistic way of looking at these things from both points of view, right? Partly because it's also. I mean, you talk about self-sufficiency, but it's also a certain self-centeredness. It's all completely self-interest, right? Does my self-interest exist with the union or against the union, right? When my argument is as part of the left is more of the the New Testament Judeo-Christian concept of loving your neighbor and taking care of each other, right? That's where I see the left.
Is that not also self-interest, though?
I think it's redefining self-interest and expanding self-interest beyond the self and the family.
So basically, no. Like there is an element of self-interest, but you don't see it as motivated as purely by self-interest.
Fucking bone here.
As say the strictly individualist idea of it.
I'm not going to get into a philosophical debate with you at this point as to whether or not there is zero self-interest in expressing less self-interest. I mean, that's a paradox I don't want to explore right now.
There's less self-interest.
Yeah.
In that approach.
That's kind of my looking at it. I'm going to beg.
No! You're not allowed
to go for a smoke.
No!
Why don't you guys watch this thing, and then maybe we can get started.
Yeah, okay, whatever. I'm just being contrary. I'm just being a jerk. That's all my problem is.